Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. My name is Jamira Burley, and as always, I'm here with my brilliant co-host, Bria Baker. And as last episode indicated, it is still Women's History Month, a time we celebrate the extraordinary contributions of women throughout history.
Yeah. And while celebration is important, and you'll hear us say that during every Heritage Month, but Women's History Month also calls us to ask harder questions about the present. Um, Embracing, and we're not necessarily embracing, but like confronting the reality that around the world, women and girls are often the first to feel the impacts of conflict, displacement, and political instability. And we have to be really honest about that.
No, absolutely. Today, we are exploring how global conflict, including the war unfolding in the Middle East, shaped the lives of women and girls and what it means for diplomacy, humanitarian efforts, and international accountability.
Yeah. And we're especially excited because we'll be joined later by someone who's worked on the front lines of international diplomacy, Jalina Porter. I'm so excited to hear from her. She's going to help us understand what's happening and what's at stake. But we got to kick off with them headlines. So, Jameer, what are we working with today?
Unfortunately, we have to kick off with the headlines. And we reported about this a few months ago, how the Social Security Inspector General and congressional Democrats are investigating a new allegation from a whistleblower around allegations that a former Doge employee, a potential software engineer, retained copies of personal and sensitive data information for nearly every living American, and that he put it on a personal thumb drive with the goal to share it with private individuals in the private sector. And this raises extremely alarm bells because this may be the biggest breach of public and private information that we have ever seen in this country. And it's just a prime example that Doge has not provided any sort of legitimacy. It was never a legitimate agency from the beginning, but the fact that they allowed Doge to have access to so much sensitive data without any sort of accountability or oversight may really cause long-term damage for every American. I wouldn't be surprised if they have to eventually issue almost new Social Security numbers for every single person if this information has been previously breached and may continue to be accessed to the private market.
Yeah. I mean, I'd seen someone describe this when Doge first started doing what they were doing, and seeing how shifty Elon Musk was being, was like, oh, this is a data mining effort. And this is, in the name of being efficient in government. This is his way to siphon out relationships. I think that Elon Musk, as evil as he is not a dumb person. I think he knew that he did not have a long time in the Trump administration, but that if he could leave to something that would be valuable to him and to the other people working on that mission, then everybody made off with what they wanted, except for the American people, of course. So, I just think that we're going to be really seeing the fallout of this administration for so many years and decades to come. People, dealing with identity theft issues and their data being sold and stolen, and not even realizing like how bad that is going to be until it's too late. So, ciao.
I know I feel like this is a prime example of like, you see the iceberg, but you don't see what's underneath it.
Yep.
And we don't know how deep and how wide this will really turn out to be in the short and long-term implications of that.
Yep. It's going to be a train wreck. We've been saying that from the beginning, but nobody listens to Black women until it's time to, say that as a catchphrase.
Or unless they want us to save them. So
right. But we tried to save them and they still didn't want to listen to us. So I don't know what to do with these people. But next headline, continuing on in the negativity per se, but from more of a sentimental place, Reverend Jesse Jackson's homegoing services recently took place in Chicago. Such an outpouring of love for him. He had actually kind of been on like a bit of a tour towards the tail end of Black History Month and the beginnings of Women's History Month, concluding with the primary services in Chicago. And this is not the point of this necessarily, I think that everybody should look at the different speeches and the photos, and it's really, really beautiful and how much people showed up. But one thing that has been on my mind is that Reverend Jesse Jackson's son made some controversial remarks where he was, basically coming at the presidents who were there, who had spoken at length. And there's been such a debate about whether it was appropriate for, Jesse Jackson Jr. to say what he said about them or whatever the case may be. Something that I saw, which is that Reverend Jesse Jackson's granddaughter kind of came to his defense and was acknowledging, like, listen, you This is a man, a father, a grandfather at the end of the day, and everybody wants to grieve him, and everyone wants to show their
Yep.
respects, and is being rolled out the red carpet to do so. But at the end of the day, a family wants to grieve their loved one, and you have family members who are being like basically Apollo Theater swept off the stage to make for presidents to give 30 minutes of remarks, and I really do resonate with what she was saying there. Like at some point, the family is like, "Hey, we want to just talk about our dad, our
Yeah.
husband, our father, our grandfather, or whatever the case may be. And we get that he means all of this to you all, but we're sharing him with you all. Can y'all share him back?" And I do want people to be just in general less judgmental of how people grieve. And maybe, Jesse Jackson Jr. could have said it differently, or maybe time and place, or whatever the case may be. But you don't know how you'll be in that situation until you're the one sitting on a stage with your father's funeral being live streamed to millions around the world, and all you want to do is say goodbye and do so in an intimate space. And I think we forget that these legends and icons have families who all their lives have had to share them, and damn, even in death, like we can't even let them like have their moments. So yeah, just I feel like we should be a little kinder in how we judge from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I think it's really important that, to your point, that like we should not be prescriptive in how other people deal with their own grief.
Yeah.
Especially at a time when for all we know, right? Like funerals are a clear example of people who will come out of the woodwork and claim to have been so involved and
Mhm.
inspired by who you are, but during your life they were nowhere to be found. And his
Yeah.
family are the ones who had to deal with the every single day issues of being a part of the Reverend Jesse Jackson's family, and like all of that entails the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, yeah, for me, I think it's a perfect time. I may not always agree with someone says, but it to
Right.
determine how they grieve, especially when they are grieving the loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
And people, I think, see these have these weird parasocial relationships with celebrities,
Mhm.
icons, that they think that they have more say and how a family member moves and operates when they are the ones not actually engaging with that in a
Exactly.
substantial way.
Yeah, exactly.
Back up, relax. I see both of our next headline is in regards to this unnecessary
Mhm.
war that started off of preemptive strikes that we've now heard multiple different interpretations of why the preemptive strike occurred. And just to flag, like preemptive strike, there is nothing in international law that deems that preemptive strikes are okay. What you're doing is bombing someone, right? Like this is unilaterally bombing someone without congressional approval. And it's apparently Marco Rubio said that they did it because they thought Israel was going to bomb first and they were going to be blamed for it, and therefore they wanted to come out. It's just all backwards. But what's most disturbing about all of this is during these preemptive strikes, one of the first victims of this war in the Middle East, which now has developed into a war in the Middle East, is the fact that it bombed an Iranian girls' school on the first day of the US and Iran war, killing 175 people, including most of them being children who have no say in whether or not their country goes to war. And this information comes from a preliminary Pentagon investigation found that the US forces are likely the ones who bombed an Iranian girls' school on the first day of the U.S. war, including many children, after relying on outdated Defense Intelligence Agency target data that identified that the building was a part of an adjacent Iranian Revolutionary Guard base, not realizing that it has since become an elementary school. The findings, first reported to the New York Times and correlated with so many other outlets, could find that this is the worst case scenario where there's so many civilian casualties, and is a prime example that civilians are often the ones who bear the blunt of wars that are happening in their country and those around the world. So
So many thoughts coming to mind. One, the U.S. is a surveillance state. It has all these tools at its disposal, but cannot be precise when it comes to dropping bombs and airstrikes and all of the sort, and yet still does it. And we've seen this time and time again in Palestine and across the Middle East, which I had recently seen something that was saying to refer to these areas as West Asia, because part of this, like, part of the language in using Middle East is like it becomes no man's land. It's like, okay, well,
Oh,
what
yes.
continent does it actually belong to? And are we kind of dehumanizing this group of people by just, oh, the Middle East is kind of the backdrop for our violence, and we don't have to be honest about, like, no, you're killing people who belong to this specific part of the world. So but regardless of what you're calling the part of the world, there are people there who are living lives just as complex and full as ours, and they have just a right to safety and opportunity and autonomy as we do. And just the idea that we get to play war in someone else's backyard, but the moment it comes to our steps, like, we're going to be crying and never forget for the next several decades. And it's like, as a New Yorker who lived through 9/11, who had an aunt who had to walk across that bridge home to Long Island, like, we cry during those moments, and then we don't acknowledge and take accountability when we're doing it to other people. And so it's gut wrenching to see the photos of children, parents sharing the photos that they'd taken that morning before they dropped their kids off, or at recent parties, and just seeing, like, these are babies who are becoming casualties in a war that Congress didn't sign off on, that we didn't ask for, that is being done in the name of who. And then to go to my next headline, the first 6 days alone of this war, this siege that Trump has started, has cost us $11.3 billion. So again, we don't got money for student loan debt cancellation. We don't have money for universal health care. We don't have money for better education, for free education. We don't have money for daycare. Parents are paying mortgages on daycare bills. We don't have money for proper public health and proper public safety either. We don't have money for none of that stuff.
None of it.
Well, we got money for 6 days of bombing Iran, 6 days of leaving people across not just Iran, but across the UAE and many other countries nearby stranded, and like we got money for
all pieces, right? And picking up the pieces, like, it's really infuriating to watch a country that is supposed to be the richest country in the world, who are just really bad at math. And I actually pushed back against your statement earlier, and the idea that they have bad intel. I am not under the illusion that America has bad intel. I'm not under the illusion that America is wastefully spending money. There is money in war. There is money in war. There is terror in bombing a girls' school, right? It is to say that no one is safe, especially those who are the most vulnerable, especially those who are next to a military base. And I think America uses this as a tool of war, and billions of dollars are being wasted while Americans can barely afford to keep their lights on. It's infuriating. It reminds me, that Tupac was right. We got money for war, but can't feed the poor. And America is eating itself, because we have been at war the vast majority of our history. And the other parts of our history, we were conducting one of the largest slave trades in the world. We have a lot to unpack. And I think until we reconcile with that, we're going to continue to see our legislators bargain with the bodies of marginalized communities in this country, sending them off to fight a war that doesn't benefit them and that harms people who are just as disadvantaged as they are. And I think that's one of the things that's the most infuriating. But we're going to take a quick break. For those who are just tuning in, you are watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Brittany Noble, Midwest-born, HBCU educated with experience in newsrooms across the country. Well, I've teamed up with Roland Martin to bring to you The Breakdown. This isn't just news. It's our stories, our voice, our community. Join me for The Breakdown, Monday through Friday at midday, only on the Black Star Network.
those who are just tuning in, welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. And again, this is Women's History Month. This month is framed around celebration, and we absolutely should be celebrating. But we cannot do just be blinded by the achievements of women across every field imaginable, but also without talking about the millions of women and girls who are navigating very devastating consequences at the hands of war.
Right. Yeah. If you look at the data, the numbers are staggering and absolutely disproportionate. According to the UN, women and children make up nearly 80% of people displaced by conflict globally. 80%. And you know, it's not women and children starting those conflicts. But when those bombs fall and communities collapse, women are often the ones carrying our families, finding shelter, protecting the babies, and trying to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. The impact goes far beyond immediate violence, right? War disrupts everything that keeps communities functioning: healthcare systems, schools, food systems, economic stability. For women and girls, that means increased risk of gender-based violence, forced marriage, or losing access to education entirely.
Yeah. And we've seen this in conflicts across the world. It's not new to this moment, from Ukraine to Sudan to Gaza. We are seeing this now, though, when infrastructure collapses, maternal health care disappears, access to clean water disappears, schools close, and the ripple effects can last for generations, again, affecting women and the children that they're raising the most.
Yeah, and I'm reminded, even still, despite all of the violence, and women mostly being those victims of conflict, they're also powerful agents of peace and diplomacy, right? They're the ones that oftentimes are able to negotiate and collaborate and bring communities together under very trying circumstances, despite them being used as a political mechanism by their leaders.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Research from the Council on Foreign Relations shows that when women participate in peace negotiations, agreements are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years. And yet women remain dramatically underrepresented in those formal diplomatic negotiations. So again, it's like we have the tools to make this look different, but we are not often put in position to be the ones deciding what our futures will look like.
Yeah, and that's where the conversation about leadership becomes so important. Women leaders in diplomacy, foreign policy, and international institutions are bringing new perspective to issues in security, humanitarian responses, and global cooperation. I think it's also important to note that since the Trump administration started, we have hundreds of thousands of women, particularly Black women, who are traditionally in systems of change, like government, like international diplomacy agencies, that have been unemployed and have been part of the workforce. What is the role of women now? Those kind of institutions like USAID, the State Department, and other governmental functions not being in place that would have not prevented, but maybe lessened the blow of how this is going to impact very vulnerable populations.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe could have maybe could have prevented. You know, it's not a silver bullet that, you know, having identity politics and having a certain group represented on that stage will mean no violence. I mean, we've seen that in the past with women in these positions, but there are so many progressive women who are ready to take the helm, but are being barred from those opportunities. You know, Jameer, you just mentioned it, but yeah, when we did that episode on Black women being pushed out, the agencies that they were being pushed out from the most were agencies like USAID, or local domestic agencies focused on things like education and healthcare. So attacks on women are attacks on our larger access to those things, our larger access to safety and health. And that's why we have to have today's conversation. It's not enough to champion women and be like, let's wear pink for a month, or, power to the, like, we're in a time where trad wife rhetoric and like language that is pushing women to think that they should be in the workplace, that being a stay-at-home whatever is ideal. And listen, if that's truly a choice that you make, amazing. But it's not something that should be pushed onto women. We should have the option to engage because we have something unique to offer. And so that's what I want to see us talking more about, that if we want a more stable and just world, women have to be present, not only in humanitarian responses, but also in the rooms where we're just making decisions about war and peace in the first place, because we wouldn't need as many humanitarian responses if we didn't have the conflict to begin with.
Exactly. And I think I've said this all the time, women are the ones that they are the glue to any community you look around the world, right? They raise the babies, they set the culture, and they are rarely celebrated for those contributions. And I think especially in moments of conflict and war, right, recognizing that women are shut out of those rooms while still expecting to hold the fort down and keep the family together and bringing to communities, like the way in which resources are shared across communities can make a massive difference. And those negotiations and sharing are done by women leaders, without former titles or without any sort of compensation. And it's reconciling that if we continue to go down this path using women as tools of war, right, and put women out of positions of power, we're never going to get to the type of humanitarian and conflict resolution that we all want, both here in America and around the world, right? I don't know anyone who is not in a government position right now who is like, yeah, this war in Iran makes sense. Like, yeah, like let's go bomb a school, like let's go bomb a center city. And this is not just happening in Iran. We've also seen Lebanon being devastated by bombs coming out of Israel, because this is what we've seen over the last few months. This is not only a war of natural resources, but these are wars and oftentimes escalation of a land grab, right? Like we see this happening time and time again, of people using the illusion that harm is coming their way to grab more land and harm more populations. Lebanon, I've read reports that there are apartment complexes being hit with missiles coming out of Israel. So it's pretty frustrating.
Oh yeah, but no, that's
yeah.
I didn't even see those fully. Oh, sorry, say that again.
I said, I think that's why I'm excited for our next guest who works in this every single day. I formerly used to work in global development around education, and there are some intersectionalities, but this is so much bigger than just education. But I think education is one of the pieces that highlights that when war and conflict happens, children rarely get access to education, which can impact their ability for upward mobility for decades, if not generations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I'm so excited to hear from her too, because I just want to make sense of some of these things as well. And it's like a lot of us know in our hearts that something is like a system is not working, or a system that's really, really messed up. We see the rubble and the aftermath of these moments, but getting to talk to someone who kind of is in those rooms or is around those rooms and can pinpoint exactly where we might be better informed and better advocate and what we need to be demanding more of. But also to your point, just really acknowledging that, none of these politicians and leaders and executives can claim to be pro-women so long as they fuel conflict like this. I mean, we know for damn sure Trump ain't pro-women.
No one in the Republican Party is pro-women. Y'all can't say that while at the same time stripping women of their basic human and civil rights here in the United States. Like, be for real. Like, I've read the Heritage reports and like what they're planning to do or what their goal, their ideal world vision for the United States does not include women having access to the same rights and privileges that men do. And there's nothing in me that believes that at the same time they're trying to hide the Epstein files, they're also claiming that this is about protecting women's rights.
Say that.
For real. Like, be for real. And also for those who are watching who are always complaining about immigrants, or saying that immigrants are taking your job, or saying that we have too much of an influx of immigrants coming to the United States. Immigrants come to the United States because we destabilize their countries. Immigrants come to the United States because we've put dictators in power and have extracted resources that prevent them from getting access to getting their most basic needs met. That's why people come here. They do not flee their home of origin for funsies. They do so because we've destabilized their country.
Yeah. So for those who and that's where it becomes like the conservative language is so nonsensical, because they will both want to destabilize other nations and then not want to deal with the fallout of it, as opposed to if you're someone who is truly like, listen, protect our jobs, protect our borders, then prevent the conflict that sends people in our way. Like we owe it to people whose nations we destabilize to then provide them safety, because we are the reason that they are seeking safety. Same with abortion access. Like, okay, you don't want to provide abortion, access, and reproductive care. But then when people are having kids that they can't pay for, you also don't want to fund any of the benefits that will allow people to better raise their families.
But also they don't want to make sure that schools are teaching girls about reproductive health and actually knowing their body so that they're not having unprotected sex. And they damn sure don't want to hold the men accountable that are largely responsible for teen pregnancy, right? Yep. The vast majority of teen pregnancies are not happening between two teens. It's happening between a teenage girl and a grown-ass man. So
nuts. Insanity. But yes, again, we have lots to talk about today. And these are the falling around conversations we need. So
exactly. So we're going to take a quick break and we are going to be back shortly with our guest. As a reminder, you're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
A decade of love, joy, and power. Black Voters Matter is 10 years old, and we are just getting started. This is love with a purpose. This is Black joy in motion. This is unstoppable power. Across campuses, neighborhoods, and back roads, let's go! We show up not just to vote, but to be seen, to be heard, to belong. We ride together. We organize together. We remind each other that our voices matter because they always have. Black Voters Matter is about more than ballots. It's about housing and healthcare, clean water and living wages, education, reproductive freedom, and dignity. It's about turning pain into action, turning belief into movement, turning community into power. We don't wait to be invited. We bring the energy. We bring the love. We bring the people. Because when Black communities come together, we don't just survive, we thrive. This is how change happens. This is how history moves. We organize, we build, we win.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. So we're having our conversation about Women's History Month, but in the context of conflict and war and who bears the burden of that. And we have such an incredible guest here with us today to dive into all of the things. Jalina Porter is a humanitarian, an entrepreneur, and a political advisor whose career spans diplomacy, national security, and congressional affairs. In 2021, she made history as the first Black woman to serve as principal deputy spokesperson at the U.S. Department of State. As a Peace Corps volunteer, former professional dancer for NFL and NBA teams, graduate of Howard University, HU, Georgetown, and Oxford, Jalina has been recognized as one of the most influential Black Americans in foreign policy. And we are so grateful to have her on the show. Welcome to The Other Side of Change, Jalina.
It's like we have Black history with us and women's
literally
history all around
Black, and we love all the things. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Happy Women's History Month. Happy, what we said, Melanated March. So happy to be here.
No, we're super excited to have you because I think, our audience, it's very easy for folks to just think about the things that are happening directly to their lives and not understand like the complexity of like foreign affairs and how that also will trickle down into your everyday lives. So I'm curious from, your perspective as someone who has worked in foreign policy. And we were recently talking before you joined about how global conflict disproportionately affects women and girls. How often, or what are the dynamics that often are overlooked in mainstream conversations about war, specifically as it relates to women and girls?
Well, let's just cap the latter of what you said. It really is the story, the trajectory, the hardships, the displacement of women and girls that not only don't make the mainstream conversation. So I'm so grateful for the both of you for, caring and having this conversation. It certainly does not make Western mainstream media, and that's a whole nother conversation. So, when it comes to conflict, there's just a domino effect. So whenever there's instability, armed conflict, women and girls, you just see it happening, like a domino effect of everyone falling. You see them, their displacement gets rough. The amount of just harassment, both physical and sexual, the amount of intimidation is unspeakable. And, I had the unique opportunity to go to UNHCR, refugee camp, and it was a Syrian refugee camp. Was the largest refugee camp that hosts Syrians, and it's actually in Jordan, but it's at about 10 kilo from Syria. And I got to sit down with a lot of women and girls when I was there, particularly women who were, had to leave some of their families, so their husbands behind, or husbands who died in the part of the process of civil unrest. Women who had babies, like I literally, a woman let me hold her infant baby, who had infant baby, and also had young boys too. So single mothers who were left to rear their children alone in the confines of a refugee camp, though I felt like it was structured, it was very obviously organized. It's not the ideals that they have for themselves, right? It is obvious. And even them, just hearing that they want to really go back, it's their home, it's what they know, even though it's imperfect, right? Nowhere is perfect, right? I think even in the United States, other countries are getting warnings about us and not coming to visit us and what happens, right? So it's just tragic to have to know and hear that there are so many women who are suffering in silence, or who just will never be accounted for. And obviously we know there are lots of mainstream media here in the United States who have the bandwidth, who have the resources to report on the ground. And I'm a little biased because, when I've lived and worked abroad, I do think personally, international media, whether it's the Al Jazeera's of the world, the BBC's of the world, France 24, when you're hearing it from also an international perspective, they just have a very unbiased and unpoliticized way of reporting what's happening on the ground, right? And sometimes those stories get told, but it's usually still, even the imagery, it's usually men, right? And even in this conversation of enacting, women and women's role in conflict and resolution, you don't often see men working on these women's types of issues. Unfortunately, from my experience and my observation, it's not the most desired or sexy, if you will, in the foreign policy community.
No, that's so true. It's women bear both the blunt of the impact, but also bear the blunt of like the labor of rebuilding and maintaining a level of peace. Even though they're rarely the decision makers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, going into that, I think that's what makes you so special in this like unicorn in the conversation we're having, because you have worked in those spaces, having worked inside the State Department, where, so much of our foreign policy is actually meted out. Can you help our audience understand how diplomacy actually works when it comes to crises like this, especially when people are wondering, like, how do we even get into a conflict with Iran? Like, why are we even there?
Yeah.
Well, why are we even there? This is undiplomatic because we don't mind our own business. That part. To really kind of tackle your first question is, diplomacy is really a tool that we use in the United States and really government to government to really push our strategic interests forward, and also to primarily resolve conflict and any kind of disputes that we're having peacefully, hence peacefully, right? But that doesn't mean that there is not knowledge and or coordination specifically behind the scenes when things are not so peaceful. So again, when there's war. So right now, again, what is it? Day 12, we're March 12th. So this war started on February the 28th. We're day 12 in this war, this U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, mind you, which was not done without legal congressional consent, which is, again, not abnormal for normal diplomatic relations. It's absurd because, number one, there's the big question of why. Yep. Why are we spending so much of taxpayer dollars when I'm sure all of us know there are Americans who are struggling. They can't buy gas, can't buy groceries, that we cannot, resolve a lot of our kitchen table issues. But then also, what are we getting out of this? The unfortunate part is that when a war starts, there's no timeline, right? We don't know when it's going to end. And I think we even think about how the current president campaigned, he's like, I'm going to end this war in Ukraine. I'm going to end it, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I'm going to end it the first day. And number one, it just doesn't work like that. And number two, has it ended?
It has not.
Right. And so I really just want us to, it's hard for someone like me, because it's like, I've kind of been in this for a long time, and people are like, well, we don't really see us, at these foreign policy tables. Like, well, yeah, because there are other issues that are near and dear to us, but they all kind of interact and counteract and intersect with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to just operationally how we get involved, I'll just share an anecdote from when I was at the State Department. And mind you, of course, this was the previous administration. Usually policy and process usually does not change across administrations. However, from what I hear from my colleagues who are still there, it has changed, I guess, on the process side quite a bit. So February 2022 is when Russia launched its very unjust war on Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And just by way of background, I don't know if y'all have heard of that, a TV show. It's called Little Fires Everywhere. I think Big Fires Everywhere.
Yeah.
So there is a conflict and instability and civil unrest, big fires everywhere at every corner of the world, all the time, every hour, on the hour, all day and all night. And the State Department plays a role in responding to all these conflicts in some type of way. Mm-hmm. And my bureau that I worked in was like the clearinghouse for all of these things. So the way we enact diplomacy is in large part, again, peacefully. Peacefully resolving disputes is in large part through what? Communication. Mm-hmm. And it's also negotiations as well. So again, when there's a war, or when we have American who's detained abroad, what do? We have negotiators come to the table. And usually those negotiators come from both sides of the parties, but we have an interlocutor who is seen as kind of a neutral party, and we have it in kind of a neutral position. So a neutral country is so to speak. We also have representation, right? So we obviously have embassies and consulates all over the world. And so that's kind of the diplomatic angle, but there's also, again, a lot of coordination. And so just generally speaking, I would have meetings every day with my interagency counterparts. But when it came to something like, the war in Ukraine or what's happening with Iran, there were daily, if not frequently, meetings just throughout the day, convenings throughout the day, just because so much was always happening. So that would be, the National Security Council at the White House, State Department, DOD, the intelligence community, DHS, Treasury because of sanctions, and kind of the heavy hitters when it comes to our foreign policy making, coordinating on so many different levels. So that could look like classified briefings, off the record press briefings or pressers with our press corps was at the State Department, having obviously on the record briefings, but obviously the messaging was completely different, being very, very, very tight and strategic and coordinating on our public facing messaging and our talking points and things like that. Mm-hmm. And vetting, and again, the bureau that I worked in, which was obviously the spokesperson's office, we vetted and had to clear every form of communication that came out of that building. So every advisory you saw, every statement you saw, every social media, we had to vet even all of the incoming requests that we got. So of course we would have our own requests, but we have lots of other principals. We have our deputy secretaries, we have our undersecretaries, we have assistant secretaries that lead the bureaus, and all of their requests had to come and get cleared and vetted through us. And mind you, we still had to do the job of, actually reporting, obviously, our foreign policy priorities to the public. And so there's innumerable, countless, tireless work behind the scenes that it's maybe even too much for me to even fully explain here, but the coordination is extremely tight. And, again, I'm speaking from when I was there, and just the margin for error, below zero, negative 100,000, because, right, when communication is your tool for diplomacy, right, and it was different for me going from the Congress to an agency is, arguably, the most powerful and influential agency that we have. Mm-hmm. Anything that you can say, especially as a spokesperson or a secretary of state, as a president, it can signal either a change of policy if it's not what we've traditionally heard, or it can move markets. Mm. So diplomacy, yes, I think by the book, of course, we are sometimes considered what people think is a soft power, but there's definitely very tight and coordination across, other superpowers and across the interagency.
Yeah. Which makes me think about considering what has happened in this administration, the gutting of many of those agencies, and how how important they were to, one, preventing war, but also helping with the rebuilding and to sustaining, and also the negotiations of ending war. Particularly, many of those roles were led by women like you. So I'm curious, do you even think, I think my initial question was actually around like, what's the role of the US in protecting women and girls when they do strikes like this? But do we even have the capacity, the institutional structure or knowledge right now in the Trump administration to ensure that, if that is even a goal?
Well, we used to, and I think it's so interesting. And I love this question for so many reasons, because, people usually think about having full circle moments as like an aha moment, and it's just so great and it's so amazing. But what we've seen and experienced is a full circle moment that has been very detrimental to women and girls in the conflict resolution and the peace building process. Let's take it back to 2017, when we had the Women, Peace and Security Act, a piece of legislation that had a widespread bicameral and bipartisan support, that was codified into law, that was signed by President Trump in his first administration. And when you look at all like the co-authors and the co-sponsors of this bill, it's just so interesting to how we went from, someone like a Kristi Noem, who was like, I love women and girls, to like, well, now she's leaving her role at DHS. But it's just interesting to see how someone like her, or, even Secretary Rubio, who also, even before he became secretary, had widespread bipartisan support, obviously among his colleagues and really even staff as well. I was too, because I just saw how he was and knew what he did as a senator, that I really, really respected and appreciated. Then you have people like a Jean Shaheen, who has just been a stalwart effort, and she's been very consistent through her lifetime, just supporting women and girls. But I think the hard part is that, again, we have an administration now, it's like you are having a different tune. 2017, it made us the only government to actually have a law that promoted the leadership of women when it came to the decision-making process of conflict resolution, the only one. And there have been so many other countries and governments who have, I think, like publicly stated that they would do something similar, but it made us stand out, and I think made us really showing why we're the leader on the global stage. Now, fast track to now, we have, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who was like, yeah, WPS, that's just not a thing. I'm taking it away. It's gone, or whatever the language. But then it was followed up by the president, who cut, this is hard for me as a returned Peace Corps volunteer who came from like a very, very, very small, modest budget of $400 million, which is not budgeted or moved at all. But you have DOD, or Department of War, who has $1 trillion budget, and you have the president cutting 90% of the WPS funding that went to the DOD that would administer these WPS programs that would help us on the ground, or help women on the ground when it came to areas of conflict. Another one too is probably lesser known. It's called GWE, or as we like to call it at the State Department, the Office of Global Women's Issues, which is housed under the Secretary of State. Now, obviously, a disbanded office because of what you said, all of these rifts. The State Department, traditionally has had, at least when I was there, over 30 just regional and functional bureaus. And then the secretary has specific offices. So, GWE was a longstanding office. The new office they had was, I think, the DEI office, which clearly is, that's not there. They disbanded that. Anything that was supposed to support any type of minority group it's just gone. And so it's sad. And then, going back to what you said about women's issues, not really getting the mainstream conversation. GWE did great work. And GWE, there was all kinds of reports and rollouts that the State Department did. One of them that always stuck with me was IWOC. We have all kinds of acronyms. So International Women of Courage Awards, which was a huge rollout that was spearheaded by the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues. And so now what they did was, every year they would take about 10 to 15 women from all around the world, and obviously, areas of vulnerability and conflict, and honor them for their peacekeeping efforts. And Secretary Blinken played a huge role in this. All of the women principals in the building played a huge role in this. Joe Biden would always come and speak. And now that office is no more. And that is the trend that we're seeing, that full circle, but not really positive full circle moment that we're seeing right now, where we had the infrastructure in place. I think it's crazy because this is not even a decade of we started off on such a great note. And obviously that came with, other things that happened before then to get to that point of drafting the legislation. And obviously, everything, go figure, is an act of Congress to get done. But it's it took so long to get to that 2017 point. And here we are now, here the United States is now disbanding those programs. And that's just a shame.
And so unnecessary, right? Just so unnecessary.
Yeah.
I mean, so to that point, and kind of alluding to what Jameer had mentioned, what are the opportunities, but also the like pitfalls and places we can be more vigilant of when it comes to representation in a field like this in foreign policy? And would you encourage a listener who has been like tuning in and being like, wow, I had no idea that's all that was involved, and maybe I'm curious, like, what do you recommend that we need more Black people and specifically Black women in these fields?
I would say yes, of course we do, but I also would say take it with the grain of salt coming from me as someone who, was a history maker not that long ago, 2021. And there's a long way to go, right? And I am someone, like you said, I'm a unicorn, right? I came from, I candidly was not in the nepotistic pipeline. I had just my credentials and my education and my work product to show for. And candidly, this ruffled a lot of feathers, both on the side of my fellow politically appointed colleagues and people who were in the building and people who were outside the building, candidly, because who was I to come and take this job from a white man? Who was this job was built for in an institution that Secretary Madam Albright has coined pale male in Yale, and it's like that to this day. So who was I? This young woman, Black, and proud to be so, right? And kind of just different from the tone and tenor of others who have been in the building. It was a shock to the entire building, to the entire agency. And it's just, when you're the first, I think naturally it's the hardest. And what I like to tell people too is that, when you break a glass ceiling, you never think like the glass, it falls on you. And you're left to pick up all the pieces by yourself. And so I would want to recruit people to help me pick up these pieces, because it is hard work, it's enduring work, but it's meaningful work. And it's necessary, because what can't a Black woman fix and make better?
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it. We don't see it. We don't see it, right? And I think it's just interesting to, again, because of all of the structural issues or reasons why people were just trying to make it seem like they didn't want me there, didn't think I deserved to be there because I took a job from a white man or whatever. I think it's interesting in that there were other trailblazers too. And what's also interesting is that, like, when you think of people who made history, blazed trails, you think of people who are much older in age or just not with us. And I'm like, I feel like I still have life ahead of me, and I would love to recruit and work with the next generation, just, telling them what no one really told me about how difficult and enduring and arduous and kind of volatile. And I think what I also like to tell people too, the process of peace building is rarely ever peaceful. It's messy. It's messy, but it's meaningful. So I do want to talk about that high note. But I think too, I remember also in the building, tailgate or, dovetailing that the pale male Yale, it was a thing that was reported on, like Wall Street Journal reported. I wrote an op-ed. I'm happy to share with you guys so you can read it about it. But, the Biden administration ran specifically on DEI, and not the DEI that we know statistically that benefits white women, but DEI, they were pitching it and promoting it as a way of like every marginalized community, right? Obviously as a way to garner votes and stuff. But the campaign was not the same as the materialized outcomes, if you will, right? And so I remember we had our Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, who was the first ever woman to be Secretary of State, or Deputy Secretary of State, excuse me. And she was in like her mid 70s. And, it's kind of crazy to think that she was also back in 2015, she was like the only woman on the US side and chief negotiator of the Iran deal, and had like earned her stripes, had done all this work. And it's like women, both Black and white, are just, every time we go over a hurdle, there's 5 more. And, her boss, the secretary, I think was like 20 years her junior. And not to say that it's either, it shouldn't be like that, but it was very noticeable, especially to the media. It's like, well, if the campaign was saying DEI and we want to support inclusion, especially in our foreign policy establishment, why is it that when I look at, a lot of these key interlocutors or key leaders here in the national security decision-making rooms, that they're all white guys, right? And so we still have a ways to go. A very long-winded way of saying we still have a ways to go, and it's very meaningful work. And I hope you'll join me one day.
No, that's such a great point, and I appreciate you laying that out for those who are listening. Which reminds me, like, what piece of advice would you give to a young girl who's interested in foreign affairs as she enters this space, especially a space that seems very divisive more now than ever?
Divisive. It's very insular. Again, it's very difficult, very rigid, academic. But at the same time, progress has been made. We are still moving forward. I think the first piece of advice I would give any young woman who's listening, I'm biased here, but join the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
Peace Corps volunteers, number one, make excellent diplomats. There's not only statistics and studies that show it, there's a lot of them ascend to obviously be in roles like I have, obviously, and ambassadors. And when you are a Peace Corps volunteer, you were at the, a lower rung level, right? But you were in the front lines. There is no hiding, no escaping. And it's really funny because I remember when I first met foreign service officers, and I really didn't know about the work of diplomacy and that it could be a career until I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I became friends with very young FSOs. And then I saw how they were living, and then I saw what they were doing, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. I can kind of run circles around you guys, and y'all are not living difficult lives. I'm the one in the middle of the jungle in an area that is still infested with landmines, right? Like, I'm the one who, you guys are getting danger pay, and you're living in, like, there's grass where you are. I'm like, wait a minute. And so, but it was interesting because it actually forged a really good relationship. It's like, well, we need to give you guys money to administer programs, but I made so many friends that they're like, here's the key to my apartment. I was like, oh, and you guys have an air conditioner and a flush toilet. Yes. That was a win for me to be able to come and stay with them and befriend them. And they got, obviously helping a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer, it still helps their ideals as well. So learning how to be resourceful on the ground, learning how to really relationship build in a place where you may be vulnerable or where your country really may not be honored and respected, even though people think that they are. And then also there's getting involved. It's, again, 2017 outside of WPS, it was a big year for other organizations. I'll never forget, it was WCAP, so Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation was founded. I helped with that launch. It was such a beautiful launch. And clearly there is a need for people like us to do this work, right? And others organizationally, I'm in Links and Delta and things like that. And we do have, international work that we do within our organizations. And if women are parts of these other sororities and stuff like that too, there are work that you can do. And I want people to know that there's no one way to foreign policy or to do international affairs or aid, right? I think when you are, especially in some of these a lot more insular circles and institutions, people may try to make you think that that's the way to do it. But I mean, you can go obviously a congressional route, you can go a corporate route. Obviously, there's other areas of diplomacy that are more soft power, like our cultural diplomacy, our educational exchanges. Sports diplomacy is big. You see, and I think I talked about this recently. I was really proud to see there's a now new kind of MOU between the NFL and the State Department to try to garner more cultural ambassadors that are NFL players. And obviously there are a lot of them already do that work, right? And so it was just like a natural connection. And so there are other ways you can, enact international affairs and diplomacy. And it doesn't just have to be the State Department or somewhere as, more traditionally rigid as that. But I hope you give it a shot.
No, that's so true. There's international organizations, there's the UN, there's UN agencies, organizations, and there's not a lot of Black women from America in those positions.
No.
So your perspective will definitely be honored and uplifted, hopefully. Tell folks how they can continue to stay engaged with your work and follow along.
Yes, please feel free to engage with me online. I'm on Instagram at Glam on the Hill. That's also the name of my blog. I also tend to do a lot of writing, and I'll share with you guys my op-ed. It's actually a few years old now, but it's still relevant. I still hear from people to this day about how impactful it was. And I still do commentating, foreign policy analysis on TV, and I'll just kind of go rogue and do stuff on my own too, just because I think it's always nice to have a very unique and insider perspective, and a perspective, number one, of a woman and of a millennial and of a proud Black woman too. And all of that really helps, again, providing a world-rounded view of what we need to do to better enhance our foreign policy making process.
No, yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share the article. Would love to share it out with our
Yes. Absolutely.
when this episode becomes live. So, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we definitely have to have you back on, hopefully under more
better circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to have like some sort of foreign policy fund. We gotta find something fun.
The world is on fire, but we're gonna find.
What did I say? Big fires everywhere. It's like, woo.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Jalina.
So if you're just tuning in, we're going to take a quick break. You might want to rewind and watch that full episode, but we're going to take a quick break. You're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
With medicine and science under attack, I want to keep you and your family informed and healthy. I'm Dr. Ebony Hilton, and I knew at the age of 8 that I wanted to be a doctor. So I studied hard and became the first African-American female anesthesiologist hired at the Medical University of South Carolina since its opening in 1824. And I always say I was made into a doctor, but I was born to be a mom. And as a new mom, wife, sister, daughter, and friend, I understand how frightening a medical crisis can be. I care for individuals on some of the worst days of their lives, and it's my mission to provide you with a safe space to gain clarity on issues affecting your mind, body, and soul. I recognize that there are health disparities, particularly as it pertains to race, and I want to help bridge the gap between you and your healthcare providers. Join me every Thursday for Second Opinion on the Black Star Network, where each week I'll invite experts from various medical fields to share the latest health news. We'll discuss topics such as the vaccine debate, mental and sexual health, medical bias, infertility, menopause, andropause, nutrition, and aging. Together with my medical colleagues, we aim to provide you with a second opinion. Don't miss it, Thursdays only on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Women's History Month reminds us that women have shaped the course of history, often in ways that are not recognized, but they are experts, they are leaders, and they are the glue that are holding our communities together.
Yeah. And in moments of global crisis, the leadership of women becomes even more critical. From humanitarian work to diplomacy to community organizing, women continue to push the world toward justice and peace. So, we need to be resourced to do that work.
Absolutely. And if you want to dive deeper into these issues, explore the work of organizations like the UN, UN Women, the International Rescue Committee, and Women for Women International. Those are great organizations to start with. There's so many international organizations that are working on peace and security, especially from the lens of women and girls. And there are a multitude of ways to volunteer, to share resources, and to donate.
Yes. Another one that I'd offer up, especially if you're someone who's thinking about a young woman in your life, is Girl Up, which is a sort of like sub-organization of UN and UN Women, but that is specifically, engaging young girls. Jameer and I have both been connected to the Girl Up space across our various different, careers and collabs. So that's one if you have a young girl in your life who wants to find a place to explore her passion for foreign policy. But for people of all ages, it's important to continue to learn and stay informed and support women leaders who are working toward a more just and peaceful world.
Couldn't agree more. And you've been watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network. Again, remember to stay informed, support women leaders working on a more just and peaceful world. And as always, do not comply in advance. Have a good day.